Hello, and welcome to Meaningful ARC Input. My name is Dr. Katie Cooper, and I'm with the Greater Louisville Education Cooperative. Before we start, I want you to open up your guided notes and write down as many of the acronyms as you can in 1 minute. So go ahead and pause this video, give yourself 1 minute, and write down as many acronyms as you know. In education, specifically in special education, we use a lot of jargon and acronyms. This can be confusing to people that aren't familiar with this language. During any meeting in which parents and students are invited, make sure that you explain terms and acronyms so everyone can understand. One way that we can assure that our parents are prepared for the meeting and have knowledge of our terminology is to not only share the procedural safeguards with them during the meeting, but to supply them with a copy in advance of the meeting and offer explanations of parts of the documents they may be confused about. This is especially important for parents new to special education. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, also requires school districts to provide translators for parents, whether it be in their native language or a sign language interpreter. As we are considering meaningful ARC input, we also need to think about working together as a team. An Admissions and Release Committee, or ARC, is a team of people that come together to help ensure the success of a student with special needs. Each person on the team plays an important and invaluable role. In your guided notes, you will find a link to the Meaningful ARC Input rubric. Take a few minutes, pause the video, and review the rubric. On the next slide, you will see a video of an ARC meeting. Use the rubric to score this meeting.
All right, let's take some time to introduce and say a little bit about ourselves. Brennan, I see that you're here. Would you and your mom like to introduce yourselves to the committee?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brennan, and it's nice to see you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Rhodes, Brennan's mom. We're really pleased with Brennan's progress this year, and we look forward to planning for what's coming up this year.
Awesome. I think you're both very important parts of the ARC decision-making process. So we would love your input on Brennan's strengths, Brennan, your needs, preferences that only you two can provide. So Brennan, your math teacher, Mr. Williams, is here, and he's going to share how you're doing in his class. So Mr. Williams, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure would. Good morning, Brennan. How are you today? Good morning, Mrs. Rhodes. I hope you guys remember me. It's been so long since we got together. I am Brennan's math teacher, and I'll be sharing progress in his math class.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I appreciate that. And Mrs. Rhodes, you also may remember Mrs. Dockery Brooks, your special education teacher. Mrs. Dockery Brooks, will you introduce yourself now?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Brennan. Hi, Mrs. Rose. I've worked with Brennan this year and can't wait to share on how well he's doing and also get some input on his IEP for next year.
Thank you, Mrs. Dockery Brooks. Mrs. Rhodes, did you receive the procedural safeguards that were sent to you before this meeting?
Yes, I did.
Great. Did you have any questions? Would you like for me to review your procedural safeguards before we go any further?
No, that's not necessary, but thank you.
Okay, very good. All right, so the purpose of today's meeting is to do an annual review, take a look and see how Brennan's progressing. We're going to take a look at his individual education program. We use the term IEP. We're also going to talk about Brennan's transition to high school in the upcoming year. So I've created an agenda and shared it with everybody before this meeting. Does everybody have a copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Awesome. Can everybody access it then, I say?
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. So we're going to use that agenda throughout the meeting so that way we can keep pace and make sure that we cover all the tasks that we need to. So one of the things that we're able to do on our virtual platform is share each other's screens. Brandon, I understand that you're a kind of a computer expert. Maybe that's a strong word, but I understand you like working with computers. Is that right?
Relative.
So would you like to share the agenda with the rest of the ARC so that we can all see it?
Just give me a sec.
Sure. Ah, there it is. Look, and you're scrolling and everything. And so we've done our introductions. We've done reviewed our procedural safeguards. We're right now talking about the purpose of the meeting. And then we'll go through the rest of it as the meeting progresses. Very good. Thanks, Brendan. Go ahead and release the screen share. Great. Okay, now we're going to take a few minutes and review Brennan's progress this year. And we're going to start with Mrs. Dockery Brooks. Mrs. Dockery Brooks?
Sure,
Okay.
I'll be happy to share.
Okay, great. If you don't mind, take a few moments and maybe you can share your screen so we can see Brennan's progress monitoring data. And you can discuss how Brennan has grown this past year. I'll let you take that on over.
Yes, I will be happy to share my screen. I see at the bottom where it says share.
Okay, so let's go back to our meaningful ARC input rubric. Look at the first question. The ARC is properly constituted. Go to number 3 on your guided notes and highlight the members of the ARC that were present during Brennan's IEP meeting. Was it properly constituted? The answer is yes. While the IEP team must include an individual who can interpret evaluation results, the district does not need to add an extra member when the gen ed teacher, special ed teacher, district representative, or other individuals with knowledge and special expertise regarding the student qualify to fill this role. Additionally, if someone cannot attend the meeting, an excusal, which is written permission from the parents, must be obtained prior to the IEP meeting. Next on our rubric were the parents' rights. Were the parents offered their procedural safeguards? In our example IEP meeting, did the ARC chair offer the parents their procedural safeguards and offer an explanation of those rights? Let's see.
Mrs. Rhodes, did you receive the procedural safeguards that were sent to you before this meeting?
Yes, I did.
Great. Did you have any questions? Would you like for me to review your procedural safeguards before we go any further?
No, that's not necessary, but thank you.
Okay, very good.
So yes, our ARC chair asked the parents if she received the procedural safeguards ahead of time and if she needed him to review them. It's perfectly okay for the parent to say they don't need further explanation, but we always need to ask. Next, in our mock meeting, did the ARC chair clearly define the ARC process and the purpose of the meeting? Let's check.
All right, so the purpose of today's meeting is to do an annual review, take a look and see how Brennan's progressing. We're going to take a look at his individual education program. We use the term IEP. We're also going to talk about Brennan's transition to high school in the upcoming year.
So the answer is yes. Our ARC chair explained the purpose of the meeting to review Brennan's IEP and talk about his transition into high school. As you will see in your guided notes, number 5, under IDEA and the KARs, parents are an essential part of any meeting where education decisions are made. Parents should be informed of all meetings and accommodations should be made by the school to ensure that the parents are able to attend and participate in the meeting. This could include a telephone call, a virtual meeting software, alternative locations and times. If the parent is unable to attend the meeting, in which placement decisions are being made, the school must document the attempts to provide the parents with access to the meeting. So go to the article and take about 3 minutes to read it. Then write in your guided notes one strategy you plan to use in your next meeting. Go ahead and pause the video now and complete the activity. The IDEA says that students should be invited to their own ARC, specifically in a meeting when post-secondary goals are being discussed. This allows the student to understand their goal and know what they're working towards. How can we make sure students are meaningfully involved in the IEP process? Well, here's some ideas. 1, speak openly with your student about his or her disability, classification, and learning needs. 2, explain to your student what services he or she should be receiving and what those services are meant to provide. 3, slowly integrate the student into the IEP meeting. Maybe start with 10 minutes at first and increase from there. 4, encourage student participation. Choose a section of the IEP and have your students prepare something to add, such as interests, strengths, and preferences. Remember that the IEP isn't just about academics. Including a student's extracurricular interests is one way to let the ARC know some engagement strategies for your students. Inform teachers and service providers that you're working on this and ask them for support. Speak with the student about his or her transition goals and how he or she is going to work on them. Encourage your student to set his or her own academic and post-secondary goals. And remember, it's a process. Student participation takes time and requires ongoing conversations about your student's disability and needs. While there's certain required members of the ARC that we've just discussed, there are people that may be invited to the ARC meeting when appropriate. This could include related service personnel that work with the student, a behavior therapist, a school counselor, a school psychologist, or other professionals that can provide meaningful input on the student's progress. It is also important for all members of the ARC to participate and have their voices heard. In your guided notes, look at number 7. How do we ensure meaningful ARC input? After reading the explanation of the suggestions, take 1 minute to think and reflect on a time in which you were in an IEP meeting and didn't feel heard. Then, using the list, tell how one of these strategies may have encouraged you to participate more in the meeting. Go ahead and pause the video now and complete the activity. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, is a two-way street. It's not only about protecting the privacy of students, it also allows for parents to have access to their children's educational records. They may also make an appeal to have inaccurate information changed. Additionally, FERPA sets guidelines for how schools can share information with other professionals, like doctors or therapists. FERPA does allow schools to post directory information about their students. Take a moment to review the FERPA link in your guided notes and answer the questions. Predetermination is what occurs when a district does not allow for meaningful parental participation in the IEP process and determines the child's program and placement without parental input. The district violates the IDEA when it predetermines a child's IEP or placement. This is an issue litigated with increasing frequency in disputes over the development of an appropriate program for a child. All right, so let's go to the You Be the Judge activity in your guided notes. I'm going to read the scenario, and then I would like for you to answer the question in your notes about predetermination. Brennan's parents attended his annual IEP meeting. When they arrived at the meeting, they were handed an IEP with draft written at the top. The ARC chair went on to tell them that because of Brennan's behavioral needs, due to his autism, that he would need a more restrictive environment. However, his current school didn't offer that placement, and he would need to attend another school with a self-contained classroom. Brennan's parents expressed the concern that they didn't want him to switch schools because he would be separated from his siblings, and the school they offered to him was too far away from their home to walk, and it wasn't directly on a bus route. So they wouldn't be able to participate in school activities or meetings. The district representative said, "Sorry, this is all we can offer." So go to your guided notes and answer the questions about predetermination. So were the district's actions predetermining the student's placement? While the IEP said draft, the parents expressed their concerns about the student moving and gave reasons that it would prevent them from actively participating in the future meeting. The ARC chair did not open up the discussion about potential placements to take in consideration the parents' concerns. So yes, this was predetermination. Writing an IEP should be part of the ARC's duties during the meeting. Each member should be able to provide input into all aspects of the IEP. It doesn't mean that the ARC members can't prepare for the meeting by creating a draft IEP. In order to prevent drafting an IEP being predetermination, a good idea is to share with the parents prior to the meeting so that they may review it and come to the meeting prepared with feedback. You also want to make sure that you always write draft at the top of any IEP that hasn't been approved through a consensus with the ARC. So let's talk about reasonably calculated. In the Andrew F. versus the Douglas County School District case, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that IEPs must be reasonably calculated to enable the student to receive education benefits. The Supreme Court went on to say that it had long interpreted this language to mean that a child's IEP is adequate as long as it's calculated to confer an educational benefit that is merely more than de minimis. The Act contemplates that this fact-intensive exercise will be informed not only by the expertise of the school officials, but also by the input of the child's parents or guardians. Each IEP should have a statement of measurable annual goals designed to enable a child to be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum. They went on to say that when all is said and done, a student offered an education program providing merely more than de minimis progress from year to year can hardly be said to have been offered an education at all. For students with disabilities, receiving instruction that aims so low would be tantamount to sitting idly, awaiting the time when they're old enough to drop out. The IDEA demands more. It requires an educational program reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. The Supreme Court addressed how judges or hearing officers should determine whether a school district has provided a free and appropriate public education or not, using the Raleigh standard. They look at two ideas or principles of the two-part test to determine if FAPE has been achieved. Step 1, determine if the procedural requirements of the IDEA have been met. Step 2, examine the IEP and the student progress to determine if the special education program is providing benefit for that particular student. Examine the IEP and student progress to determine if the school educational program is providing benefit for that particular student. And that goes to positive progress. Remember, an IEP is developed in order to create goals that will allow a student with disabilities to access the general education curriculum and make progress towards standards. Therefore, the ARC needs to discuss how the current IEP led the student to make positive progress towards accessing the curriculum. This is an important part of the IEP process, and each member of the ARC should come prepared to discuss the student's strengths and progress, as well as their areas of need. IEP development is a process. The ARC must consider all aspects of the IEP when determining placement and programming. The information provided in the IEP should support the decisions you make about the student's program. Consistent with Andrew F. decision, it is essential to make individualized determinations about what constitutes an appropriate instruction and service for each child with a disability and the placement in which the instruction and those services can be provided to the child. The U.S. Department of Education has explained that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to educating children with disabilities. Instead, placement decisions must be individualized and made consistent with a child's IEP. First, placement is not an either-or decision. Rather, students might receive services and supports across a combination of settings. Each district shall ensure that a continuum of alternative placements is available to meet the needs of children with disabilities for special education and related services. The continuum shall include alternative placements of A, instruction in the regular classes, all students get this, B, special classes, C, special schools, D, home instruction, and E, instruction in hospitals and institutions. All of these placements are essential to support the various needs of students with disabilities within our schools. Students with disabilities should be educated alongside their peers with and without disabilities to the maximum extent appropriate. In addition, the law indicates when needed, supplementary aids and services must be provided to enable the student to be educated in the general education classroom. However, when the nature or severity of the disability is such that satisfactory progress cannot be achieved in the setting, even with supplementary aids and services, placement in a more restrictive setting might be necessary to ensure an appropriate education. LRE is determined on a case-by-case basis during the development of the student's IEP. These services and supports should enable the student to make progress towards meeting identified academic and functional annual goals, be involved and make progress in the general education curriculum, as well as to participate in extracurricular and other non-academic activities, and to take part in these activities with both disabled and non-disabled peers. The term environment and least restrictive environment can be interpreted to imply that LRE is a place or a location. In fact, LRE does not merely refer to a particular setting. Rather, identifying the LRE involves making program decisions about what services and supports a student needs to be successful and where and how these services and supports can be provided effectively. When making decisions during an ARC meeting, teams must come to a consensus. This doesn't mean that the parents or the school gets their way, but rather the ARC team agrees that the program drafted during the meeting allows the student the most access to the general education curriculum in the student's least restrictive environment. Consensus is not a vote. It means everyone agrees to the terms set by the meeting. Go to your guided notes and read the 6 tips for coming to a consensus during an IEP meeting. Choose one of the strategies that you believe would have worked best during our You Be the Judge activity with Brennan, and make note of that in your guided notes. We would like to thank you for participating in our Autism CAP training. For more information or technical assistance, contact the Greater Louisville Education Cooperative at jcps.glec@jefferson.kyschools.us, or give us a call at 502-485-3280. And you can always visit us on the web at www.kyglec.org. Thank you again.